They told me the dog was broken. They said he was a devil wrapped in fur, a weapon that had turned on its handlers, something that needed to be put down before it tore a throat out. I stood there in the humid Georgia heat, watching 100 pounds of German Shepherd throw himself against the chain-link fence, teeth bared, snarls ripping through the air like gunfire. The other men stepped back, fear etched into their faces, hands hovering near their holsters. But I didn't step back. I saw something they missed. I saw the trembling in his hind legs. I saw the whites of his eyes rolling not in aggression, but in sheer absolute panic. The lieutenant laughed, a dry, cruel sound, and said, "Go ahead, Private. He's all yours. Let's see how long you last before he chews you up." He wanted me to fail. He wanted to see the black man bleed. But he didn't know who I was, and he certainly didn't know what I saw in that cage. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. I'm sitting on my porch now, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the Virginia sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. My knees ache when it rains, a reminder of nights spent sleeping in mud and the unnatural contortions of jungle warfare. At 70 years old, the silence is my closest companion. I have a fresh cup of black coffee in my hand, the steam rising and disappearing into the cool evening air. It's quiet here, away from the city, away from the noise of a world that seems to have forgotten the cost of the freedoms it enjoys. I look down at the old wooden floorboards. There's a worn spot there, right by the rocking chair, where a dog used to lay. I haven't had another one since. Some bonds are too heavy to replace. The wind rustles the oak trees, sounding like a distant whisper. And for a moment, I'm not an old man on a porch anymore. I'm 22, sweating through my fatigues, staring into the eyes of a creature that the world had decided was worthless. It was the sound of a chain rattling against metal that brought it all back today. My neighbor was fixing his fence, and that metallic clink, clink, clink drifted across the yard. Instantly, the smell of pine needles and wet red clay filled my nose. I could feel the oppressive humidity of Fort Benning clinging to my skin like a second shirt. I could hear the rhythmic chanting of platoons running in the distance, the heavy thud of combat boots hitting the pavement. Memories don't ask for permission. They just kick the door in. That sound took me right back to the kennels in 1968. It was a time when the country was burning with riots and protests, and the military was a microcosm of that fire. We were preparing for Vietnam, training to walk into a green hell, but for some of us, the war had started long before we ever got on a plane. The war was in the looks we got at the mess hall, the assignments we were given, and the constant need to be twice as good just to be considered half as capable. Life on the base was a strange mix of discipline and chaos. We were the K-9 unit, the guys who walked the perimeter with living weapons on leashes. It takes a specific kind of person to handle a war dog. You have to be calm, assertive, and possess a balance of fearlessness and respect. Most of the guys were farm boys from the Midwest or city kids looking to avoid the infantry meat grinder. I kept to myself mostly. I polished my boots until they looked like black glass. I kept my uniform crisp, and I did my job without complaint. We spent our days running obstacle courses, teaching the dogs to track, to attack on command, to hold their position even when gunfire erupted around them. It was grueling work. You smell like wet dog and sweat permanently. But I loved it. There is an honesty in animals that you don't find in people. A dog doesn't care about the color of your skin or where your father was born. A dog only cares about the content of your spirit and the steadiness of your hand. The humiliation started the day Lieutenant Graves took over the unit. He was a man with cold, blue eyes and a smile that never reached them. He didn't like me. He never said it outright. He was too smart for that. But it was in the assignments he gave me. While the other handlers got the prime dogs, the ones with stable temperaments and good lineage, I was given the washouts. I was given the dogs that were sick, old, or simply stubborn. He wanted to break my record. He wanted to prove that a black man lacked the command presence to handle a high-value military asset. "Some people are just natural followers, Private," he said to me one morning during inspection, flicking a piece of lint off my shoulder. "They aren't built to lead, not even a dog." I stood at attention, staring straight ahead, jaw locked so tight my teeth hurt. I didn't say a word. I knew that any reaction would be used against me. I swallowed the anger, tasting its bitter bile, and focused on the job. Things escalated when Ajax arrived. Ajax was a massive German shepherd, dark sable, almost black. He had bitten 3 handlers in a week. He was scheduled to be euthanized. The rumors were that he was psychotic, a bad seed. Graves had him brought to the isolation kennel at the far end of the compound. He called the unit together, a smirk playing on his lips. "Since Private Thorne thinks he's the dog whisperer," Graves announced, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "he's going to take Ajax. If you can get him to heel by the end of the week, you keep your rank. If he bites you, or if you fail, I'm transferring you to sanitation. We need people to burn latrines in Da Nang." The other guys laughed nervously. It was a death sentence for my career, and maybe for my hand. Graves knew it. He handed me the leash, threw the key on the ground at my feet, and walked away. He wasn't giving me a chance. He was giving me a public execution. That night, the silence around the isolation kennel was heavy. The other dogs in the main run were barking, but Ajax was silent. He was pacing, a shadow moving in the darkness. I didn't go in with a catchpole. I didn't go in shouting. I walked up to the wire and just sat down. I sat there for 4 hours. I didn't look at him. I read a book by the moonlight, turning the pages slowly. I let him smell me. I let him smell the absence of fear. I let him realize that I wasn't there to dominate him. I was just there. I knew what it felt like to be judged before you even spoke. I knew what it felt like to have people look at you and see a threat because of how you looked or where you came from. Ajax wasn't mean. He was terrified. Someone had hurt him. Someone had tried to break his spirit with a heavy hand, and he had fought back the only way he knew how. I whispered to him through the wire, "They think we're both monsters, don't they? Let's show them they're wrong." The first real interaction happened on the second day. I opened the gate. The air in the kennel froze. Ajax froze, his muscles coiled like steel springs ready to snap. He growled, a low rumble that vibrated in the concrete floor. I didn't move toward him. I sat on the ground, my back against the fence, and took out a piece of dried beef from my pocket. I tossed it halfway between us. I waited. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, he moved. He crept forward, belly low to the ground, eyes locked on me. He took the meat and retreated. We did this for hours. By the afternoon, he was eating out of my hand. When I finally clipped the leash on his collar, he didn't try to bite me. He leaned against my leg, a heavy, warm weight. It was a transfer of trust. He gave me his fear, and I gave him my protection. When I walked him out of the kennel, head high, he trotted beside me like we had been partners for years. The next morning, I brought him to the obstacle course. The rest of the unit was already there. When Graves saw me walking Ajax on a loose leash, his smile vanished. He looked like he had swallowed a lemon. "Begin the course," he barked, expecting the dog to bolt or attack me under the stress of the gunfire simulation. I gave a quiet command. "Forward." Ajax moved like liquid smoke. He scaled the 6-foot wall without hesitating. He crawled through the tubes. He held a stay command while blanks were fired 10 feet away. The other dogs were good, but Ajax was magnificent. He worked with a desperate intensity, focused entirely on my voice. I didn't have to shout. A whistle, a hand signal, a whisper. We moved as one organism. The other handlers stopped watching their own dogs to watch us. It was undeniable. We weren't just competent, we were superior. During a break, I sat with Ajax, giving him water from my canteen. One of the younger guys, a kid from Ohio who had never spoken to me before, came over. "How'd you do that, Thorn? That dog put 2 guys in the hospital." "Eh?" I patted Ajax's massive head. I remembered my grandfather back in Mississippi. He was a sharecropper who trained bird dogs for the wealthy white landowners. He taught me that you can't bully a creature into loyalty. You have to listen to what they aren't saying, he used to tell me. Fear smells like vinegar, boy. Anger smells like smoke. You gotta smell the vinegar and offer honey. I looked at the kid and said, he wasn't wild. He was just waiting for someone to ask him what was wrong instead of telling him he was bad. It was a small revelation, a mini victory, but I saw the shift in the unit's eyes. They started seeing the work, not the man. But Graves wasn't done. 2 weeks later, we were in a live fire simulation in the deep woods. It was meant to replicate a jungle patrol. We were using live rounds for target practice in a designated kill zone. The tension was high. It was hot, the insects were biting, and everyone was on edge. Graves decided to lead the patrol himself, pushing us hard, yelling orders, trying to create chaos to test the dogs. He was reckless. He wanted to see someone crack. He pushed us into a sector of the woods that hadn't been fully cleared by the engineers. He was walking point, confident, arrogant. I was at the rear with Ajax. Suddenly, Ajax stopped. He whined, a high-pitched sound, and the hair on his back stood up in a ridge. He wasn't looking at a target dummy. He was looking at the ground 20 yards ahead of Graves. I knew that posture. It was the alert signal for a ground disturbance, a trap, or worse. I yelled, "Hold up!" Graves spun around, his face red with rage. "Who gave you permission to speak, Private? Keep moving." He took a step forward. Ajax barked, a ferocious booming sound, and lunged against the leash, dragging me forward. "Control your damn animal," Graves screamed, reaching for his sidearm. He thought the dog was attacking him. He was going to shoot Ajax. I had a split second to decide. If I let him walk, he hits the tripwire or the pit. If I let the dog go, the dog might tackle him, and Graves might shoot the dog. If I tackle Graves, I'm assaulting an officer. I dropped the leash. "Ajax, take!" I screamed. It was the command to disarm. The dog launched himself like a missile. He hit Graves in the chest, knocking him backward, hard, into the dirt, away from the path he was walking. Graves hit the ground screaming, his gun flying. Ajax stood over him, teeth bared, pinning him to the earth, drool dripping onto the lieutenant's pristine uniform. A split second later, a massive deadfall trap, a log spiked with rebar, left over from previous war games, or perhaps a poacher, swung down through the empty space where Graves had been standing a second ago. It whooshed through the air with a sickening thud, impaling the mud. If Graves had taken one more step, he would have been skewered. Graves lay there, staring up at the spikes of the log swinging inches from his boots. Then he looked up at the snarling dog inches from his throat. He looked at me. I whistled. Short, sharp. "Ajax, heel." The dog instantly stepped back, closed his mouth, and trotted to my side, sitting down calmly as if he hadn't just taken down a grown man. The silence in the woods was deafening. The entire platoon stood frozen. Graves scrambled backward, dirt all over his uniform, his face pale as a sheet. He looked at the trap. He looked at the dog. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The devil dog and the handler he despised had just saved his life. This is where the story usually ends, but there's a part I never told them back then. Later that evening, Graves called me into his office. He didn't look at me. He was filling out paperwork. "You handled yourself well, Private," he muttered. Then he paused. He pulled a file from his desk drawer. It was my personnel file, but he had another folder underneath it. He slid it across the desk. It was the breeder's papers for Ajax. "And it seems," he said, his voice tight, "that you were right about the dog." He tapped the paper. Ajax wasn't a reject. He was from a lineage of Austrian police dogs, highly decorated. The previous handlers had beaten him because they didn't understand the German commands he was trained in. I knew the commands because my grandfather had served in WWI and taught me bits of the language. I hadn't just tamed a wild dog, I had recognized a professional who was being treated like an amateur. I came back to the present now, the coffee cold in my hands. I can still see Graves's face that day. He didn't become my best friend. He didn't apologize for the months of racism, but he never disrespected me again. And he never, ever raised his voice at Ajax. We deployed to Vietnam 3 months later. Ajax and I walked point for that platoon for 13 months. We found tripwires, we found tunnels, and we found ambushes before they could happen. We saved Graves' life twice more in the jungle. The man who wanted to send me to burn latrines ended up recommending me for a Bronze Star. But war takes its tithe. We didn't all come back whole. Ajax made it home with me, but he was different. He paced at night. He would wake up shaking, just like I did. We lived out his final years on a small farm I bought. He couldn't handle fireworks on the 4th of July, and neither could I. We would sit in the basement together, me holding his paw, him leaning his heavy head on my shoulder, 2 old soldiers waiting for the all clear. When he died, I buried him under the oak tree where the sun hits first in the morning. I put his service tag on the cross. He wasn't a pet. He was the better part of me. The price of war isn't just the bodies you leave behind. It's the pieces of yourself you lose along the way. It's the realization that the anger and hate you see in the world, like the hate Graves had for me, is just fear wearing a mask. I carry the scars of shrapnel on my leg, but the deeper scars are the memories of the good men and the good dogs who gave everything for a country that didn't always love them back. I learned that dignity isn't something someone gives you. It's something you keep, no matter how hard they try to take it away. There is a lesson in the leash. You can pull and choke and force a living thing to do your will, and you might get obedience, but you'll never get loyalty. Loyalty is a gift. It has to be earned. I earned Ajax's loyalty by seeing him, really seeing him, when everyone else saw a monster. And in a way, he did the same for me. He forced those men to see the soldier, not the skin color. He forced them to respect the competence, even if they hated the package it came in. The sun is fully down now. The porch is dark. I reach into my pocket and pull out a worn, tarnished piece of metal. It's his dog tag. I rub my thumb over the name stamped into the steel, Ajax. The metal is warm from my hand. I can almost feel the coarse fur under my fingers again. I can almost hear the sharp intake of breath before a command. I stand up, my joints popping, and look out into the darkness. I'm alone, but not lonely. The ghosts I keep company with are good ones. If this story found you at the right time, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Sometimes sharing these heavy memories makes the load a little lighter for all of us.